Hey everyone, in this video I wanted to show how to make a cube because as we build our simulation we're going to use a lot of cubes. But let's just start with one cube so that way we get this video so we demonstrate how to build just one cube using HTML and CSS. So by the way, I know that there's other videos on YouTube that show how to make a cube. In my experience, they're not really that great. They mostly play really loud music and don't explain much. There are really great web pages on how to build a cube, so I'd recommend looking at those. However, those web pages I've noticed, they're not really building cubes for simulations. They are building cubes just to show on a web page, maybe just one cube to show as like a small little icon or something. So, and pardon one of my cats if you can hear him kind of stretching and meowing in the background. But anyway, let's get into the cube. So probably 3 sections in this video. One, I'm going to build the cube, and then the last 2 sections, I'm just going to briefly talk about how this cube is specifically tailored for the simulations we're going to build. So we have, as you can see, here's the HTML. Let me make the font a little bigger, so hopefully you can see it pretty well on YouTube. So let me just make this a little bigger. Okay, so I hope this is big enough, and I hope the cube is big enough. Let's see, I'll do that, and I'll make the HTML even bigger. Let's see. Okay, so just a standard HTML document here with a body, and the only thing in this HTML document is the cube itself and some text for each of the sides, right? So as you can see, it's pretty self-explanatory. We have a parent div with class cube. And as we all know, a cube has 6 sides. So the parent div cube has 6 sides. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Obviously a top, bottom, left, right, front, back, and so on. So that's the HTML. It's pretty straightforward. You can literally, by the way, this is all live right now on html4d.com. So if you want to go there, look at the source code, copy it, you're welcome to do so. So, that's the CSS, which I'm about to get into. But here, you can literally just copy the code if you want to. Okay, so there's the HTML, and now let's quickly go over the CSS. And how do I make this window a little... I think I have to make the font just a little smaller so I can explain what's going on. Okay, so let's look at the CSS. Okay, first we just have the parent div, we have the cube, the top and left are both 50%. That's because for the purpose of this demonstration, I am centering the cube in the middle of the web page. So I could take this down to let's say 30%, but then it's going to be, at the top of the web page, and then you can't really see it. Same thing with the left. I could take it down to 0%. But then you can't really see it. So I want it to be 50% so that it's right smack dab in the middle of the web page. Awesome. Position absolute just makes it so that the top and left are 50% relative to the to the body in this case. Okay, so transform style, very important. We want to preserve 3D. Otherwise, all of the child divs get displayed flat on a 2D surface. So we want to preserve the 3D presentation because, as we'll see in a moment, these sides have they have rotations and translations in the Z direction. So that's into the screen or out of the screen. So we want to preserve 3D. If I turn preserve 3D off real quick, let's see what it looks like. Yeah, everything is just flat. Any of the Z transformations basically get ignored. They're not rendered. So we need those Z transformations so that the back is pushed into the, is that going to be positive or negative Z? We'll find out. But basically it's pushed into the Z direction. So we want the back to be more in the back, the front in the front, and left, right, and so on. And so we need to preserve 3D in order to keep those Z transformations. The transform here, that's just on the cube itself. So we don't even have to have these. I could take this down to 0. So the x-axis, as you know, goes left to right. Y-axis goes top to bottom. The z-axis, if you can imagine, it's hard to demonstrate on the screen, but it goes into and out of the screen. So it's kind of along this axis here. So I don't have to rotate the cube, but just for the purpose of the presentation, I'm rotating it, so that's why it's easier to see all the surfaces, everything like that. I think it was at -20. And so if the x-axis is going left to right, as I rotate it, as I transform and rotate it over the x-axis, this is basically what ends up happening. The cube spins sort of in a vertical direction, as you might expect if you were to rotate something over or around the x-axis. Same thing with the y-axis. Let me bring this back down to 20 degrees. Okay, so same thing with the y-axis. You know, the y-axis goes up and down. So if I rotate it around the y-axis, as you can imagine, it spins around, kind of like a top. So in the y direction, as I increase the rotation value, it spins counterclockwise. As I decrease it, spins clockwise. So I forgot what was this at? 20 degrees, I think. Let me just refresh the page. Yeah, 20 degrees. Okay. And similarly, finally, we have rotate z. I don't need to rotate it in the z direction, but if you can imagine, that's sort of the axis that's parallel to this line here. So if I were to rotate it, we should see it spin around that z-axis. And so, yeah, so you can see, well, so the z-axis is parallel to this line here, but it's actually in the center of the cube. So the cube essentially spins around its center, but in the z direction. Okay, I hope that's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, you can definitely leave a comment. I will do my best to respond to all the comments that I can. So that's the parent cube. Let's get into the sides real quick. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the side class very briefly. Every single side has the side class, and this cube has a size of 100 pixels. So as we know, a cube is 6 sides. All the sides are the same width and height, and so in this demonstration, I'm doing 100 pixels. The position is absolute, so that our transformations are gosh, I don't even know how to explain that correctly. They're absolute. If I don't do absolute, then they're going to be relative to, I want to say, I don't know what they're relative to, but I'm just going to keep it absolute here. I believe absolute is going to be, so the transformations are going to be relative to the cube here. I do know that to be true. If it's not absolute, I think it's relative to the body in this case. So anyway, we'll just keep it absolute. And so for the tops, so every single side is 100 pixels. Every single is 100 pixels by 100 pixels. So all the sides are the same dimensions. It's important to note, by the way, and I'll get into this in my second part of the video, but the cube itself, if you remember, it actually has no width or height. Which means it's kind of an abstract concept, or it's just a point in space-time. It doesn't actually have width and height. And I'll get to that in the second part of the video. But here we have a side, and let's look at the top side first. So top side, I did give it a background color of red, just so it's easy to distinguish. I also gave it opacity of 0.8, so that way we can see through it, and so that way I can just see the text in the back here. So if I just get rid of the opacity and just make it 1, then you cannot see through the top. But I want to be able to see through the top, so I'm just going to make it 0.8. And okay, so let's take away the transform for a second. So if I do not transform the top by default renders here. And this corner, the top left corner of this top side, is actually the center of the cube. So let me actually get rid of these transformations and show you exactly how this works. So here's the top. Here's essentially the top with zero transformation, right? Something's wrong here. Let's take this down to 0. Okay, so whether I turn on, so this is now a 0 transformation, nothing's happening. So the first thing I want to do is I want to rotate it 90 degrees over the x-axis, so that way the top actually faces upward. So let me just do that. I'll take, and look at that, it rotates over the x-axis into this into the screen, I guess. And so now I've rotated, and I've rotated over the x-axis. Now the x-axis is this line here, so it's rotating over this line right here. By default, it rotates over the center of the div. You can change that using CSS. I believe the style is transform origin, but I like transforming over the center by default. So it's so we're just going to rotate X over the center x-axis of the side. Next, we need to move this top. We need to move it upwards, right? So this is the z-axis, and I need to move it upwards. Okay, I don't need to move it to the left, right, up or down. I need to move it. Well, I don't need to move it left, right, or into the screen, out of the screen. I need to move it upwards. And this is a little bit, I'll see if I can explain this. Now that I've rotated the top by 90 degrees, remember originally the z-axis points in and out of the screen. Okay, the z-axis, if you can see this line here, this is the z-axis. So if I were to translate it right now, I'm going to go forward and back, because the z-axis points forward and back. However, once I rotate the the top side by 90 degrees over the x-axis, that z-axis now points up. So I wish I had an easy way to demonstrate that. Maybe eventually I need to build a tool so that we can see. But as I rotate this top side 90 degrees, this z-axis, which points at you right now, will actually point up once I rotate it over the x-axis. So I'll just rotate it. And so now that the z-axis points up and I need to move the top side up, I'm going to translate this top side over. I'm going to translate it in the z direction upwards. And just looking at this visually, I know since the cube is 100 pixels tall, I know that I need to translate it 100 pixels upwards. So as I do this in 10 pixel increments, I can see that right as I get to 100, it is perfectly where it needs to be. So similarly with X, so now z-axis goes up and down, the x-axis goes left and right, y-axis goes up and down, but actually in this example now into and out of the screen. But I just need to move it left, and I can see I need to move it left by half the size of the cube, so that's probably going to be negative 50 pixels. So I can do that. And by the way, if I happen to make a mistake here, it's really easy to visually see. So if I miscalculate and I say I need to add X, I'll quickly see, oh, the top goes the wrong direction. So I'll just set that to negative 50. And that's how I get the top side. It's more, I'm not really calculating all this stuff in my head. It's kind of visually I'm looking and I'm seeing, okay, what direction do I need to rotate this? And what direction do I need to translate it? And then I just visually do this and put it in the correct position. So same thing with the 5 other sides. So originally the bottom would be here, just like the top was, but I need to rotate it over the x-axis and then simply translate it in the x direction. So let me get rid of these values to show you. So this is the default position of the bottom. I want, by the way, and I'll talk about this in part 3, this text here, bottom, I want it to be legible from outside the cube. It's just a personal decision. You could make it so that if you want the bottom to be legible from inside the cube, that's fine. I've decided for now, I want this text to be legible from outside. And that means that later I can edit this HTML, I can add a video, I can add an image, I can add whatever. I can even add an iframe. But that means that any HTML I put in here will be legible from the outside on the bottom of the cube. So instead of rotating it in the positive X direction, because then the bottom would be facing into the cube, I'm going to rotate it into the negative X direction. And then let's see, I think this is going to be moving to the left here, if I'm not mistaken. So again, I'll just visually test it out. And it looks like, yeah, I needed to move it to the left. So I needed to take away from the X-axis. If I was wrong, I would have quickly found out I was wrong. I'm moving in the wrong direction. No big deal. So let's do that. Let me refresh the page, make sure everything is back to the default values. So same thing with the left, right, front, and back. Every single one of these sides by default starts in the center. So if I take away the transform property, it always starts in the center. And so with every single side, you just have to figure out which way to rotate it, which way to translate it, and so on. It's not overly difficult. And obviously in this example, every single side has a different color. So pink, red, purple, blue, whatever, just 6 different colors. And that is pretty much how you render a cube using HTML and CSS. It's going to be really cool as we start to play with these, just rotating, moving these around, literally having hundreds of these on the screen. I want to get back to one of the other videos where I was showing hundreds of these on the screen, where you could render new cubes, things like that. So we're going to get back to that as quickly as possible. Okay, so that's pretty much how you render a cube, and just want to make 2 quick points. So part 2 and part 3 are just 2 really quick points. The first point, or part 2, the one point I want to make is what I said before. This cube has dimensions of 0 by 0. This cube div right here is actually, it might be more accurate to call this cube point or cube center, because it actually is a 0-dimensional concept or 0-dimensional object. It is just at x coordinate 0, y coordinate 0, z coordinate 0. And eventually I can move the entire cube. Let's see if I haven't done this, so I'm doing this live. I hope it works. But let's say if I want to translate this in the z direction, let's say by any number of pixels, look at that. I can move it towards us. I can move it also away from us. That is so cool, right? And so on. Let's see what happens if I just want to rotate, move it away from us. Yeah, so it's moving away from us. It's a little hard to see with the current perspective. We're going to get into perspective in one of the later videos, but you can already see, because perspective is going to make it smaller as it moves away from us too, which is one of the coolest things. But yeah, you can see I can move it all around the screen, and if I have multiple of these on my world, you'll be able to soon see that it's really cool. We can just move these cubes all around the screen, and it's all HTML and CSS. So anyway, the point is that this cube tag actually represents the center. If I just to show you, if I quickly give it width, like let's say I give it 10 pixels and height of 10 pixels, right? And let me give it a background color of black, let's say. So it actually is in the center of the cube. So maybe if I rotate it around the y-axis, I can kind of show you. See how it's just sitting there in the center? And it should, to be more precise, it should be the top left corner of this square that's sitting right in the center. So it's not the center of the black square. It should be the top left corner. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so you can see. And by the way, it's moving because the position is top 50%, left is 50%. But so if I make this 50 pixels by 50 pixels, this top left corner is the center of the cube. These lines should be flush with the side of the cube. Let me try to rotate this a little bit so we can see. And yeah, as you can see, as I rotate the cube, the position 0, 0, 0 is exactly where the top left corner of this cube div is. So that's an important. Let me take those off. So that's an important difference with my cube and some of the other cubes we see online. In this case, what is for our simulation, what does it mean if a cube is at 0.000? It means that the center of the cube is at 0.000. It does not mean that the top left front corner of the cube is at 000. If this were a 2D simulation, I guess that could make sense. But this being a 3D simulation, for the sake of simplicity, because this is going to get complicated quickly once we add more cubes and more objects of different shapes and sizes, we want to easily be able to remember where the center of the cube is. I don't want to have to constantly figure out, oh, the center is in the top left front, or if the cube's rotated, it's actually in the back and all that stuff. So it's always going to be in the center. Okay. And part 3, the final thing I want to say is real quick, the all 6 of the sides, as I mentioned earlier, are translated and rotated such that the text faces outwards. So the front faces the front, the left faces the left, and so on. So as I rotate around the cube, or better said, as I rotate the cube itself, I can read that it says right. I can read that it says back, and so on. The text for back is not upside down. It's not in the bottom corner, whatever. And that means that I can add stuff here, right? So if I edit this as HTML, maybe I want it to be in bold, let's say back, right? And for whatever reason, I want the C to be capitalized, and I'll make it italic, just to demonstrate. And so this is just to demonstrate this is pure HTML, and I can rotate it. It's legible. Eventually, I can add images, iframes. I can write JavaScript that specifically renders things here. It's because anything you can do in HTML, you can do here. And by the way, it'll render in 3D. So let me go back to the cube, and as I rotate it, that HTML is still legible. That back text that I wrote with the italicized capital C, it is still legible as I rotate around. So that's deliberately done. I did not want the back stuff to be down here. And I did not want it to face inside the cube either, because then it would be, all the text would be mirrored and it would not be legible. Okay, so that's pretty much the cube. And I'll write in the description a little bit of text about why it took me so long to upload this video. It took years, I think. But anyway, for those who are interested, I'll put that explanation in there. But this is how you make a cube. I hope you enjoy. Next, I'm going to upload videos just making progress on the simulation. And I think that might involve just making a quick JavaScript cube API, so that way we don't have to write one parent tag and that's 7 tags just for one 3-dimensional object. It'd be nice to have an API where I can just write one tag and the cube renders using JavaScript. And then from that API, we'll most likely be able to add multiple cubes, start moving around the world, and so on. So I think that's what will be next, but this is how you do a cube. Thanks so much for watching. Definitely leave any questions, comments in the description. I want to try to see if there's still interest in this project and see if I can get it going again. Browsers are a little more powerful now, a few years later, so this project might be viable now. So we'll see what happens. Thanks so much. Hope everyone's doing well. Talk to you soon.